This video is going to be my first ride report in my mid-price trail bike project. And I actually didn't think I was going to do a video until I got up into the mountains next week. So this is kind of an unplanned video, but I do have some thoughts I want to share after riding the 2018 aluminum Trance and the 2017 carbon Trance on my local trails. Now my local trails are cross country. There is nothing on these trails that warrant a long travel trail bike such as these. And I have a Trance for riding in the mountains or maybe for some more rugged type terrain. And I want to comment on how the bikes compared, because what I did was yesterday I went out on the aluminum Trance and then the carbon after that and kind of did the same lap. And then today went out on the carbon Trance first and the aluminum. The aluminum Trance, the first thing that I want to say is you can notice the weight. Even though it's only a 3-pound difference, there is still quite a bit of, the bike just feels a little bit, just a little bit sluggish and a little bit heavy. I've noticed, and I remember Richard Cunningham saying this years ago, I read, that once you get above, I think it was the 28-pound mark, there's a difference in the way a bike feels. And this definitely holds true. So like I said, there's a 3-pound difference separating these bikes. And this bike felt a little bit sluggish compared to the carbon for a few reasons. One is the weight. Also, the rear shock on this bike is softer in the mid setting. Now, I don't know if you know this, but a Fox shock is tuned differently for each manufacturer depending on the leverage ratios of the suspension. So based on the suspension design, Fox will custom tune a shock for a manufacturer according to the manufacturer's recommendations or specifications. So I don't know if the shock is tuned differently in 2018. Everything about the geometry of these two Trances is the same. And so the leverage ratio is going to be the same, but it just feels like it's a little bit more, you know, soft and mushy, so to speak, in the mid setting, which is where I ride the shock most of the time. When you move it over to the locked out position, it's really firm. You wouldn't want to trail ride in that. That's for riding on the road or maybe a long trail climb or a dirt road climb. But most of the time I ride in the mid setting. So it did feel softer in that mid setting, which made the bike feel a little bit more sluggish. Now, I will say that I didn't notice hardly any difference between the Kashima coating and the black coating on the shock and the fork. So at this point, I don't think Kashima coating is that big of a deal. Is it smoother? I didn't notice a difference, and really it's partly because of the way the shock was tuned. So that's something that was interesting to me. And really the only difference, like I said in the opening video, is the only difference is you had got less tuning features and the lack of the Kashima coating. So that, you know, again, that's not that big of a deal. So this bike actually felt like it had more travel. It feels like this bike is a little bit more capable on rough descents. Now I won't know that until next week when I do rough, long, steep descents in the mountains. But this bike just feels like it's more of an all mountain bike than the carbon Trance. Now here's the deal with the carbon Trance, is it felt more lively, it felt more snappy. So if I were going to pick a bike that I wanted to do some cross-country duties and more trail and all-mountain duties, the carbon Trance is awesome. It just feels like, it feels faster. And I'll talk about I did a little bit of time stuff today. Really didn't plan to, but I just decided to try it out. But the carbon one is definitely, it's a faster bike. There's just no way around it. It's a faster bike than this one. Now, that being said, I don't have this bike to be a cross-country bike. That's not why I have a Trance. If I wanted to rail single track on cross-country type terrain, I'd be on my cross-country bike. That's not why I have a Trance. If you were looking for a Trance to like I said, kind of blur the lines with cross-country, you could even cross-country race on that carbon Trance. But if you wanted a bike that was really versatile, you probably want to go for the higher end trail bike. I won't really get into, you know, having two bikes versus one. That's kind of a different topic, but the carbon one is just really versatile. Something else that I want to mention about the suspension, not only did I not miss the Kashima coating on this bike, I also didn't miss the tunability. I typically, in the open setting, I will leave the factory suspension in the #1 position, so the softest open position. And I feel like when this suspension is set fully open, I feel like it's about the same. So, you know, and I really like the lever on the fork. So just being able to be completely, you know, you can set it wherever you want. There's not 3 positions. It's infinitely adjustable between fully open and fully closed. So that's kind of nice, actually. You know, the big difference for me in the suspension was I just feel like this shock is tuned differently. I feel like I have to run a little bit more pressure in the shock. In fact, I do have 10 more PSI in the shock, even though it's the same length shock. So that's the suspension. Now, shifting. The only difference that I noticed is the fact that the SLX is just less precise. And also on the SLX, when you shift into a smaller cog, harder gear, faster gear, you can only go 1 at a time, whereas XT you can hit it further and go 2 gears at a time. And also the SLX is just really muted. It doesn't feel near as crisp and precise as the XT. Now, is that a big deal? Probably not. I mean, it's, you know, it's whatever you're used to. So, but the you know, the cranks, everything else, I mean, you really don't notice that much of a difference with the SLX and the XT. And since I'm mentioning drivetrain and shifting, I made a comment in the first video that this bike comes with XT cassette, and someone had commented that on Giant's website the specs say SLX. It's an XT, so maybe I got the special treatment, but this bike came with an XT cassette, so go figure. I don't know if everyone's going to come with it, but this one did. Like I said, I did time myself on a couple sections. The first one was a hill that was fairly steep. It took a minute and 45 seconds to get up on the carbon Trance. When I went back out on this bike, it took me 10 seconds longer. Now I will say I was pretty toasted because it was brutally hot and humid today. Like it just felt worse today than yesterday. So maybe that slowed me down a little bit. And then I did a really short cross-country section that took me 3 minutes and 47 seconds on the carbon Trance, and it took me about 12 seconds longer on this bike. So not a big difference, but like I said, this bike just feels, a little more sluggish and slow than the carbon. The carbon wheels and carbon frame make for a really snappy handling bike. Now the thing that I really want to know is how these bikes do on a downhill. Because for me personally, that's why I buy a trail bike, to just, you know, get up the climbs, however long and steep they are, whatever, and then just to rip it on the downhills. And so that's what I want to find out, is, you know, are the wheels going to feel stiff enough? Is the frame going to feel stiff enough? Now, I've said before that I would rather have carbon wheels and aluminum frame than a carbon frame and aluminum wheels. So part of this project, when I get back from my trip to the mountains, is I'm going to swap the wheel sets on these bikes. I think they're going to fit fine. They're both the same spacing, so I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. So I'm going to put carbon wheels on this bike and see how the ride characteristics change. And I'm going to put the aluminum wheels from this bike on the carbon bike to see how that, you know, see if what I have been saying holds true for these Trances. So that'll be a cool comparison. So I'll go ahead and conclude this kind of preliminary result of comparing these bikes. Definitely don't have any conclusions yet. I'm not going to say whether or not I think a Carbon Trance is worth almost twice the price, well, $2,200 more than the aluminum. That's what we want to find out. Would I recommend spending that much more money for basically, here's the deal is, it's going to come down to, for me, it's going to come down to frame and wheels. Carbon frame, carbon wheels, or aluminum frame, aluminum. The braking feels almost identical between these two bikes, between SLX and XT. The shifting, I could totally live with SLX shifting. The suspension, this Fox, they call it Fox Performance versus the Fox Factory. So the Performance is the lower end. I could totally live with this Fox Performance suspension. I would not miss the Factory, it's kind of an eye-opener for me, actually. I didn't think, and again, I got to get up in the mountains. I got to really hammer these bikes. I haven't, hammered the bikes. The trail I rode today, like I said, is just not, it's not good testing ground for the ruggedness of a trail bike. But it did give me some pretty interesting preliminary results, and that's what I want to share in this video. So, keep an eye on the channel. I'll be posting some videos next week when I get up into the mountains and ride North Georgia. I will say that I got a gimbal. It comes in tomorrow, so I made a little investment into my YouTube channel. I do like recording videos from behind the bars of a bicycle. It's fun, and I might do a little vlog when I get my gimbal in. So, smoother video coming to my channel. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.